welcome to Tome of Uselessness. I'm Dan, doing some solo recording, and today I want to talk about The Long Walk, both the film and the book. I wanted to see the movie. I was interested immediately in the movie, and then it was just one of those ones where I just, you miss it in theater, or you forget about it, and then next thing you know, it's gone. And yeah, I'd learned that it was based on a book, and so I was like, what I'll do what I like to do, I've mentioned before, is that I'll watch the movie, then read the book, because doing it the other way around just makes you angry at the media piece, the adapted media piece, usually because, there's either character changes, story changes, and etc. And a lot of times the book can provide extra context as to why a character is doing something or whatever. So that's what I did. I, finally managed to watch the movie last week, maybe 2 weeks ago at this point, and then read the book afterwards. It's a 300-pager kind of thing, not too long of a challenge. It's funny, it's written in that time when Stephen King was writing too much, and so he had to publish it under, Richard Bachman, I think, is his pseudonym for that scenario. Like I said, just wanted to talk about it all and give some thoughts and some comparisons and some things that I thought worked in both and some critiques. But, as I mentioned, the book was by Stephen King. The movie was written by J.T. Molyneux, directed by Fancis Lawrence, who has directed a ton of stuff. I'm kind of surprised that this project was at such a lower budget, that he couldn't get something bigger. Although, right now Hollywood's kind of weird about their projects, but he's proven director. He's done a bunch of the Hunger Games and a whole bunch of other stuff. When you look him up, so he seems like he should have some juice there to get it going. But maybe because at the time, maybe there's not just not big stars. But yeah, so Fancis Lawrence directed. Budget was $20 million. Box office take $62 million. The music by Jeremiah Freites, and the director of photography was Joe Willems. And the reason I wanted to bring up the DP, the movie goes very minimalist, probably for budgetary reasons, but also it's just a lot of landscapes and people walking, so it's you got to make it more interesting and stuff like that. And so I thought the photography was really good, and one of my favorite things about the movie was that because of the nature of their walk, the camera was essentially always moving, and so you just kind of get used to that motion of the movement until there's a sudden stop, and it just becomes super visible, super noticeable that there's a stoppage, because it's just so jarring after an hour and a half of just constant motion. So yeah, I really like that, and like I said, I thought that was very effective. The cast, who we got here? We got Cooper Hoffman, who plays Raymond Garrity, who was number 47. David Johnson, Peter McBeers, 23. Garrett Waring was Stebbins, 38. Tut Nyott, sorry. Arthur Baker, number 6. Charlie Plummer as Gary Barkovich, number 5. Ben Wang as Hank Olson, number 46. Jordan Gonzalez as Richard Harkness, number 49. Joshua Ojic as Caldy Parker, number 48. Mark Hamill coming in, playing the major, just having a presence over the entire movie. Roman Griffin Davis as Curly, number 7. Judy Greer, who plays Jeannie Garrity, and Josh Hamilton plays William Garrity, who is Garrity's parents. Yeah, in some flashback, and we see Judy Greer early in the film. Yeah, like I said, with the major, I was reading, and they shot the movie in chronological order. So Mark Hamill, even though he's in 5 scenes, essentially, maybe a few more than that, but he's not in a ton of the movie, but so he was involved in the entire shoot because he's in the beginning, middle, and the end. I just thought that was kind of interesting, but he was kind of semi-retired, but credits Mike Flanagan for kind of bringing him back and, doing something fun. And yeah, in this movie, he's just, similarly to the book, he's just described as kind of almost an embodiment of fascism or evil, in that he's just kind of a blank presence. In the movie, he's got more dialogue than in the book. He just kind of gives a couple speeches here and there where we don't really, at times he's talking, but the characters just walk past, so they don't get to hear the full speech, kind of a thing. Whereas in the movie, he's in the vehicle paralleling the walkers at certain points, and there's some dialogue there, and it's always nice to see Mark Hamill showing up. Like when I realized it was Mark Hamill, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. It's just like I said, he's just standing stoically and then delivering his dialogue. Yeah, and the only reason I mentioned Curly number 7 was because in the he's the first, pretty sure he's the first to die in the movie in particular, because it's kind of not comical, but it's kind of brutal, just shows the immediate stakes, because he's like a young kid. Like most of the boys are all in the book, they're depicted as like they're 16-year-olds. In this, they seem a little more varied in age, but they're not like young, whereas this kid is like clearly like young, like max 13 kind of thing. And so he's there for to do the walk, and then he gets a Charlie horse like immediately, and then just gets his ticket cashed, as it were, just right then and there. So yeah, just kind of like, and he's distraught about it and etc. So he just kind of gets taken down. Whereas in the book, I think they make it pretty far before actually the first person gets shot, because they break some kind of record. It's like mentioned. I can't remember the exact distance, but they're like, yeah, they mark these kinds of things, and they get past there. One major difference from the book to the movie was that in the movie there's like 50 walkers, and in the book there's 100, with potentially people on standby that show up, like another 100. So there's like 200 people potentially there, and 100 of them go. I just assumed when they were talking about it, like in the movie when they're just giving out the numbers, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense, like one for each state, depending on like how many there are left, because it's hinted that there's been a war, but it's like we don't know the lore outside of the war, or of outside the walk. But yeah, and so in the book there's 100 of them though, so there's far more. So there's condension in the adaptation, where they take some of the aspects of some characters, give it to another. The biggest one being that Stebbins, there's a character named Scram in the book, who he's depicted as a guy from like Arizona, who's like just like farm hail kind of guy, who's like, oh no, I did like a 30-mile walk the other day and was like fine. Like he's depicted as like super strong and healthy and everything. Like he gets super sick in the book, and then eventually gets cashed out of the walk, versus in the movie they give that illness to Stebbins, and the same kind of almost aspect where he's like, nah, I've been fine for a decade and I don't get sick. And getting sick during the nonstop walk is intense. So yeah, just like some of the stuff there. Also interestingly, they change Peter McVries, probably McVries, I guess. It's VRIES. Anyway, they change his story completely, like his backstory. In the movie, he's like an orphan, and he talks about like, he's got a big scar, so he talks about a fight and this and that he got into. Whereas in the book, he's just kind of, again, more depicted as a like, not downtrodden, but yeah, just like one of the like the lower class people who was working like a job and like a clothing factory kind of thing, like moving clothes from like one section to another kind of thing. And he had a relationship with a woman, and it kind of turned sour and stuff like that. So yeah, and he's got like parents. He's not an orphan. So again, just things like that. It still works, and like he's still a great character. A lot of his interactions with Ray are very much still pulled right from the book, or at least along the same kind of lines, like where he's got a lot of same kinds of thoughts and philosophy, speak that they talk about, him and Ray. Because yeah, partway through the walk, they kind of start to develop friendships, and there's like the group, like a core group, the Musketeers they call themselves, and they're like, oh, we'll help each other out, until eventually a certain point where they're like, when there's, I think, down to like, I want to say like 10 or so, or 8, where they kind of make a pact. They're like, okay, no more help for anybody, because there's points where Ray or Peter help each other out, and others and stuff like that. But of course, most of them don't follow that rule, because they kind of, again, want to keep their friends alive and keep them walking and stuff like that. So, but sorry, I guess I've been kind of going back and forth, but basically, spoilers for the movie, but it's, like I said, a bunch of young men. They meet, and it's a contest. You keep walking until there's only one left, and you have like a wrist device that tells you how fast you're walking. In the movie, they have to walk 3 miles an hour, and in the book is 4, which even to me, I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fast, actually. So I think the 3 works well because, again, it's kind of a monotonous pace that you can maintain. And that's just it, is that if you fall below that pace for like 10 seconds, you get a warning, or it's like 30 seconds. I think it's a little malleable because, again, in both the book and the movie, but time becomes kind of odd, but it's just kind of like, oh, that guy fell behind, and just like, now he's dead. But you get like 3 warnings, and then you're shot for not maintaining the pace. And the reason they do it is because there's a prize. You get to wish for essentially anything you can think of, and the government will provide it for you, as well as you get some unfathomable amount of money. You'll never have to work again, kind of a thing in your life. So every year these people compete for that kind of thing. So it's very Battle Royale, Hunger Games in particular from recent times, where it's just like these downtrodden people compete. And while they're doing this, it's broadcast over television, and there's probably radio as well. In the book in particular, this was one thing that I assume this was budgetary, was that in the movie there's a few people here and there that they pass because they're walking just like on a highway, so they're passing people's farmhouses or farmsteads and such. But and there's a crowd at the end, whereas in the book, basically past like the halfway point, there's always a crowd. Every time they go into any kind of town or anything like that, there's a huge crowd. So it's almost like a parade type event every year that people watch. Similar, again, to like Hunger Games in particular, where it's just broadcast and everybody's watching it and cheering on and taking bets and etc. In the movie, they talk about the economic boom that their inspiration from the boys will provide the country and stuff like that, and like GDP will shoot up and stuff like that because everyone's like, oh my gosh, these people, they went out and they challenged themselves and everything. So yeah, it's like I said, it's like a propaganda tool, and sacrificing 100 or 50 of their citizens is like, whatever, there'll be more. But that's a big part of the book and the movie, is the dialogue between the characters about why they're doing it, right? Like, for what reason do they get involved in this challenge if most of them aren't going to make it? And so, yeah, everyone's kind of got their own different motivations and stuff like that. The main one, Ray, is our POV character. And this was really kind of interesting. In the movie, he's given a backstory where his dad was kind of like a subversive, like, had music and poetry that he shouldn't have had, very equilibrium or such. And he eventually gets caught. And then the major himself comes to their house and it's like, hey, we're going to take all your stuff and you just have to swear fealty to me and, you're square or whatever. And his dad's like, nah, can't do that, freedom, etc. And then get shot by the major. And so Ray, his plan is to do the walk, and he wants to eventually wish for a gun to shoot the major. Which is a kind of a good plan, sort of, but it's also interesting when you get that reveal, and there's a couple other reveals as well that you're like, the major clearly knows who Ray is. And so it's like, it also works in his favor that if he just dies in the walk, then it's like, oh, that's one more dissident that like we don't have to worry about, kind of thing. So I kind of like that there's kind of that there. Whereas in the book, Ray's motivation is kind of similar to a lot of others, where he's like, I just signed up and to try to win the prize, kind of thing. So he's not really like, there's not a big overarching plot. Like, it's the same idea where his dad did called it squatted. So his dad was taken away, but not particularly like by the major personally. So he doesn't have that like connection there. So, or similar idea, but they just kind of expanded on it in the movie to make it like a narrative, right? So, yeah, big difference, of course. And then another major one is the order in the end is different than in the movie and in the book as well, which was kind of surprised at. But just going back real quick to the crowds I was talking about, one thing that I did like in the book, there was a mother who was following the walk. Like she would basically like, get in a car or whatever, and then like periodically show back up to basically like wailing wall, just like, wail that about her kid who was in the walk until eventually he's dead. And then she's like, she has to get restrained early in the book by some cops because, people aren't allowed to interfere. It's like, the rules of the long walk that people can't interfere with it. So she's trying to like get her son back or something like that. So cops like restrain her. And then eventually after her son is dead and she shows up, she goes kind of like nuts and like attacks the soldiers that are kind of watching and stuff like that. And again, gets arrested and stuff like that. So I liked that inclusion, but I could see how it was cut because, like I was saying, there was not as much crowd interaction in the movie. Let's see. Another thing I really did like in the book was Ray gets total Charlie horse like cramp really late in the book. Like it happens earlier, a couple times here and there, and even in the movie too. They're like, oh man, my legs, whatever, it's hurting, but we're just kind of powering through it. But this one it's enough that he like sits down and he's trying to like work through it, and there's like, sharp pain, and then eventually a soldier actually comes and like draws a bead on him and stuff like that. So it was a good tense scene in the book, and so I was kind of surprised that it was not in the movie, because by the point in the book that it's in, again, there's down to like 4 of them or something like that. And so that would have just been like maybe they filmed it or thought about it and it just kind of put up the tension. Or maybe, yeah, like, because the movie only runs like an hour 40, so maybe it was like, it'll just extend it for no real reason. But anyway, I thought it was a good scene because we get some real intense, thoughts with Garrity where he's just like, oh man, I'm going down here. But yeah, not in the movie. And also circling back to, like I was saying, that with the Major, including Ray, in the movie and in the book, I think it happens as well. But it's like less. It's more of you don't really see it in the movie when Stebbins receives his number. The Major says, good luck, son. And so it could almost be interpreted as just like a, hey, good luck, kid kind of thing. But it's, of course, revealed later that he's actually one of his sons, and he's got a whole bunch of them around the country kind of a thing. So he went into the walk on purpose to win. And so it kind of also leads to the point where, because he's like, oh, I didn't think if the Major knew or not kind of thing. And he's like, he did. And so it kind of, again, reinforces that the Major allowed Ray into this walk because of, like I said, yeah, because background and stuff like that, because the movie doesn't totally specify, like a couple of them, I think, talk a bit about it. But in the book, it's more explored that it's like a lottery system for joining the walk, in that people fill out like a survey, and then there's like a mental assessment, and a physical assessment. And then there's like a lottery, it's kind of almost sounds like it's like, yeah, like a big bin of names, and they just picking out names. And then there's also like a ton of people, can drop out. And so they have all the alternates and stuff like that. So I still feel like in that system, it could still be rigged by the system, right? But like I said, it kind of, again, reinforces that it's like, this is not just a bunch of random people. There can also be deeper, sinister motivations behind the walk and stuff like that. So again, like that in both the movie and in the book. I'm just going to do some major spoilers here coming up. Like I was saying a bit earlier, that the order is different in the end. So in the end, in both the book and the movie, it's Stebbins, Peter, and Ray. And, they finally kind of, not bonded, but Peter and Ray definitely have, but Stebbins is, there, and they've learned to grow and, respect each other and don't want each other to just stop, right? But Stebbins, in the movie in particular, like the illness really takes it out of him, and then he eventually stops and tells the other two, hey, you have to keep going. And then it's Ray and Peter, and then I'll come back to this in a second. But in the book, it's Peter actually sits down earlier, and so he's the second to last to go down, and then it's Stebbins, and then Ray wins in the book. In the movie, they flip it where Peter is going to let Ray win and sits down, and Ray runs up and grabs him, and he's like, no, he's like, don't do this here, because there's like a big crowd there, and he's like, walk with me another mile and then sit down. He's like, just, one more mile. And I think at this point they've walked something like 500 miles or something like that, right? And so Peter's like, okay, fine. He's like, you're very persuasive, Ray, blah, blah, blah. And after like 10 more steps, Ray sits down. And in the final kill, it's always done by the Major. And so then the Major kills Ray, and Peter's there, and it's like pouring rain, and it's very well acted. What's his name again? Johnson? David Johnson, who was amazing in Alien Romulus, again, is great in this, and he basically fulfills Ray's plan, because it wasn't his plan, right? Peter had a different plan, and fulfills Ray's plan, and it's so well done, and it's so well executed, and it's obviously narratively satisfying, but it's kind of interesting that it was like Ray had the character growth over the movie to realize like his revenge plan kind of like it wasn't enough, or it wasn't the way to live, right? Whereas Peter had a plan to live and maybe help people or do something different, wanted him to continue on. And like I said, he stops, Peter continues on, Ray gets killed, and then Peter executes the plan and gets a rifle and guns down the Major. And then like credits, right? So great ending. In the book, like I said, Ray wins, and I actually also really liked this ending in that he's walking, and then the Major tries to like step into him and be like, step in front of him and stop him from walking, and he's like, hey, son, you've done it, you've won. And Ray is pretty much like so drowned out the entire world that he's chasing a phantom in front of him, and it's described as having like the shadows of Peter and Stebbins and others that he's seen on the walk and bonded with on the walk, and he just kind of has lost his mind. Right? And it's just showing how like the walk has not only physically broken him but like mentally broken him, and he's chasing a phantom that he'll never be able to reach, and who knows if he'll ever get out of it. And again, it just like the book ends right there. And so I actually liked both endings. I think, yeah, like I said, the mental breakdown really works because there was no arching plan like that of revenge, and then the one in the movie, very effective as well. And it's a crowd pleaser ending in this really bleak movie. So yeah, I like both those movies. There was an interview with Mark Hamill both those endings. Interview with Mark Hamill talking about how they changed the ending, but Stephen King gave his blessing for the ending, and kind of once he saw how audiences liked the ending. And Mark Hamill, let's see, the quote is, the fact that they made a major change like that, it made me nervous. As it turned out, Stephen King loved it. We would have had to have changed it if he didn't like the ending, but he approved of it, and I'm glad. I said to Lawrence, if I've done my job correctly, when I get shot, the whole audience will erupt in applause. Like I said, I personally liked both the endings of the stories, and just like how they kind of played out and stuff like that. So it was very effective. Some of the actors, in particular David Johnson, and I think Cooper Hoffman, and a couple others. Anyway, they didn't want to approach Hamill on set because he's the antagonist, of course, and David Johnson in particular was like really wanted to actually meet him because he's a fan of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, and etc. And Mark Hamill as well tried to arrange like a get together in Winnipeg, but then we learned that some of the actors didn't want to like approach him and stuff like that as part of their process. He canceled that and kind of treated everybody on a day-by-day basis, or person by person if they wanted to approach. But he was saying that after the movie wrapped, then everybody was like more genial and talking with them and stuff like that. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, because you'd think, again, maybe because of the chronological nature of it, that it's like it would build up that antagonism of him just up on that Jeep where they are walking every day in Winnipeg in the summer. And so it would build up that resentment to help out in the movie and stuff like that. Because apparently, Monday to Friday, they would be out there walking, and then they would go get blizzards at Dairy Queen on Friday, rest the weekend, and then come back and start walking again. Yeah, they were walking about 15 miles a day in 100-degree heat. Again, this is all American, but, they were out there, and it was real. Yeah, David Johnson as well, speaking of him, he was going to pass on the film. He said he read it and it was really bleak, so much so that I was like, oh, this isn't for me. And he said his agent was like, take another look, and reading it, and then they were considering him for a different character, apparently. But then he met with the director, Fancis Lawrence, and then they were chatting about it, this and that, and Peter was like, or not Peter, he was interested in the Peter role. And yeah, he got cast into that. And like I said, he's great. He the 2 movies I've seen him in, I'm sure he's been in other things, but notably Alien Romulus and this, he's fantastic. Yeah, can't wait to see him in some more stuff. I thought this was pretty interesting as well, that in the mid-2000s, Frank Darabont actually had the rights for the novel, trying to make a film for it, but there was many years of no progress, and of course the rights lapsed. And, you know, he did The Mist, another King adaptation, and so, yeah, who's to say what his version would have looked like, but, you know, Frank Darabont has a good track record, so yeah, kind of interesting that didn't happen. Because again, especially at the time, you think he could have got a project like this off the ground, because it's not very elaborate. It's just a bunch of guys walking on a road. Maybe they couldn't crack the story, or they wanted to do something different. But again, yeah, like it seems like almost a no-brainer, especially for that kind of time. Like, I don't think there's anything much more I'll say. I would recommend the movie in particular. Was well made, worth the watch. Like I said, about an hour 40-ish or whatever. The book was also very enjoyable. I'm not a big Stephen King guy. I've read The Dark Tower. I've read years ago when I was like far younger. I think I read the Tommyknockers, and I feel like there's another one in there. but yeah, again, not a big Stephen King reader. But this is simple premise, and it's a study, and it's the bonds under extreme circumstances that people develop and stuff like that. So yeah, that was good. I enjoyed it, but like I said, yeah, the movie was also very enjoyable as well. Thank you so much for listening. If you like us, you can rate, review, and can you do that on more platforms? So you can do it on iTunes, I assume, or Apple Music. You can check us out, tomeofuselessness.com. You can also email us with topic suggestions or questions or, comments about this episode. And that's at tomeofuselessness@gmail.com. That's about all I'll say. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.